Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Hoss Talks FOSS. I'm the Hoss, head of open source strategy at Percona, Matt Yonkovit. And today I've got Gabe Weiss from Google. Gabe, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you, Matt?
Great, I'm great. So Gabe comes to us from the developer advocacy team. He manages the team for databases at Google.
Yep, that's me.
So I like, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the Google, database products, specifically some AlloyDB in a bit. But I like to get to know people before we talk shop. So,
Sure.
Gabe, like, how did you come to the wild and woolly world of developer advocacy?
Kicking and screaming. No. So, I've had two careers. I started off life as an actor. Actually, is where I kind of started my professional career. Yeah,
Okay.
I was a whole nine yards. Went to school for it, got trained in it, and then lived in Hollywood for about 5 years doing the movie TV thing. And somewhere in there, I've always been a computer geek. Always growing up, I had a leading edge computer, one of IBM's early, way back monochrome monitor kind of deals. And I always tinkered. I was one of the QBasic, guys that did 10, go 220. So I always tinkered. And then
Okay.
in 2002, I was already well into my acting career, which means I was successful. So I wasn't I didn't have to work any other jobs. I was actually making a living doing it. And
Wow. Okay.
which was great, right? I was making it, not really making it. It meant I didn't have to eat ramen. But the there's a game that came out called Neverwinter Nights. BioWare put it out in 2002, and it had a really cool hook on it, which was you could get their tools that the developers use to create their adventures and make your own adventure. And it was, I like my little geek brain just exploded when I heard about that. So I started cold calling the company. I cold called BioWare and said, "Hey, I'm hearing this game's going to come out. What are the chances that I could get, an early copy of the tool set to start playing around with it and seeing if I can create cool adventures with it?" And they didn't answer my calls for about a month. And finally, Tom Ohl, who is the lead tools programmer for the tool set, answered. He picked up the call and he's like, "Look, if we give you a copy, will you stop calling us?" I said, "Yeah, of course, yeah." So I got a copy of this tool set, and it was what they promised. You could absolutely get these tools and create these awesome adventures. And there was the catch was you could create very basic stuff, but if you wanted to create more advanced adventures, you needed to know a little bit of programming. And the scripting language that they did, it was a proprietary language, Neverwinter script, and it was based on C. It was an API that wrapped C. So I did what any enterprising young youth did at that stage of the game. I taught myself C so that I could create these adventures. And it kind of launched from there. That launched my software career. So I did some contract work for BioWare, and then a buddy of mine said, "Hey, I'm working for this little company in the San Francisco Bay Area. Why don't you come up and do an internship during the summer? Hollywood shuts down anyway." Perforce Software is a source control company, and I went and I was like, "Source control? That's sure. I get to be in the Bay Area. Why not?" And it was supposed to be a summer internship, and I ended up working for the company for 12 years. So that launched the tech career back in 2004 is when I moved up to work for Perforce. And while I was there, even though I was an engineer, there were cases where they needed someone to go talk to companies that were trying to adopt Perforce. And we didn't call it developer advocacy at that stage of the game because we didn't know that DevRel wasn't a thing yet back then. So I was doing it though, and I was kind of teaching people how to use Perforce and best practices and how to set it up and what to do. And then when I applied to Google many years later, I came in as a partner engineer. It wasn't even DevRel. It was coming in as partner. And as I was interviewing, the recruiter said, "It doesn't sound like you're a great fit for partner engineering, but have you heard of DevRel?" Because she was looking at my resume. On my resume, you always want to have like a hook, some kind of
Yeah.
something, right? Sword fighting is on mine, and yeah. So, and they were like, "Well, sword fighting, where'd that come from?" Like, well, I've been an actor for many years. And they go, "Acting? Have you thought about DevRel?" Like, I don't know, what's DevRel? And
But
next
wait,
thing,
wait.
oh
So are
yeah,
you implying that you need acting skills for DevRel? Like you have to act out like scenes from the code?
yeah. I mean, you got to fake it, right? No.
Hmm.
It's so part of being in DevRel, of course, is getting out and speaking at conferences about the industry trends and your software, and being an engaged speaker is kind of important so that people just don't fall asleep during your talks. And that combined with my tech background is really what led me into DevRel. It is the perfect job for someone like me who's been embedded in engineering for years. I had 15 years of engineering background before I came to Google, and then acting on top of that, it was like the dream job for me. I'm like, wait, you're going to pay me to go stand on a stage like I'm still acting, but now I get to talk about cool engineering things? Yeah, sign me up. And that's what happened is they brought me in. So Greg Wilson was the director of advocacy when I was doing the interviewing, and he's the closer. Like they call him in when they want to bring someone in and they really want someone for DevRel. He's the one that you talk to. And sure enough, he brought me into the San Francisco office, slapped me up on the 7th floor where it's the roof deck overlooking the bay. I mean, it's like, okay, I get to work here. Yeah. So yeah, that was me. Yeah. That's what brought me into DevRel.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so you got wined and dined to come here, come with us.
I did. It was awesome.
Join us. Yeah. That's always good to feel wanted, in that regard. But it's interesting. You said something that I keyed up on, and it was, you were doing DevRel before DevRel was a thing. And so I talked to a lot of people in the open source space, a lot of people in the community space, a lot of people in DevRel. And it's so interesting because it's like, we're doing this new thing. It's called DevRel. Yeah. And it's like, so what are you doing? We're showing users how to use our software.
Because that's new. Wait, no, it's not.
What did we do like 10 years ago? What did we do like 15 years ago? No, of course we did it. And it's interesting. And I like to kind of say that now in a DevRel space, or even in it kind of crosses boundaries sometimes into the quote unquote community / DevRel / it's kind of all the same thing in a lot of companies. But it's really weird because we're starting to see more small companies say, we need DevRel, not marketing.
Yeah.
But then they turn it into marketing,
which is awful. I mean, you're losing out on what I feel like makes DevRel the special thing. There's developer marketing, and that is huge. And you need to have developer marketing. That's, this question comes up all the time. Like, okay, what's the difference between marketing, core marketing, developer marketing, and DevRel? Like, what's the big difference between those things? And it's like, okay, core marketing is going after the business. This is how I define it. This is obviously not how canonical, but it's how I think about it. So core marketing goes after the business side of things. Developer marketing is still marketing, but it goes after you at home, like you on kind of your off time. Like, oh, that's interesting. I should play with that. And engaging that mind of kind of still, I hesitate to use the word, but evangelizing your company's products. DevRel is about the core. Everything about DevRel is help developers be successful using your stuff. And sometimes that means telling them not to use your stuff. And, I can hear my marketing people go, don't do that, please. Always tell them. No.
Yeah.
The reality is that our job is to make sure that the developers' needs are met. And that's the big difference. And that if you're just marketing, most of my job these days, honestly, I have not done a huge amount of outside facing work. I haven't done a large volume of blog posts. I haven't actually spoken at conferences because of pandemic. So I don't actually do a lot of outward facing stuff right now. I'm engaged in communities and I'm getting feedback from developers and talking to them about how they use our stuff. But most of my job right now is actually talking to the product team and giving that developer voice to the product team and saying, look, I know you think you know how your database is being used, but I got to tell you, that's not how databases are being used right now. This is what people are doing. This is what people are having trouble with. Here is how we can make your product better for developers to use. And some product managers already have that sense. And that's a really easy conversation. Like, oh, no, you're right. We didn't think about that. And other times they're like, yeah, I don't ever talk to developers directly. So they don't have that perspective. They're so used to business stuff. And that, the new product we launched, AlloyDB, it's really aimed at enterprise level users. And as a result of that, the people that are in charge of developing the product are very business oriented. They're very much thinking about these enterprise class users, which is great. And that should be for a product like this. But there are tweaks that can and have been made to help the smaller companies or the the companies that maybe aren't used to thinking as this large enterprise class grade system, there are things that we can do to still make it for both, and that's where DevRel sits. That's the beautiful place for DevRel.
Yeah, and so this is where it's a super interesting thing, and a couple things that you mentioned, the difference between developer marketing and DevRel. In a lot of small companies, it's kind of a combined role, which is cool, but you tend to gravitate towards one or the other, and you miss out completely on the other, right? So,
Sure.
I like to say, anything that I'm going to do about educating, it starts with a story. I want to tell a story that can kind of capture what developers or people are trying to do, and then I'll show them how to do it.
Yep.
And that story type is a lot of the developer marketing side of things, and having that cohesive thing. And then you go into that, let's show you how to be successful. Let me get into the weeds. But you tend to find people who tell the story and then do nothing else, or tell you how to use it and then don't tell you a story, and then everyone's like, why should I use your product? I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's great that you're showing me how to build this Node app, but I don't care.
Right.
Like, I have Node already running. Why am I using your stuff? Right.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And so I think that kind of place we're at in the DevRel space makes it a really weird and awkward time, because many of us are trying to help the end users, and they're really confused because as they jump between technology, sometimes they pick up bits and pieces of individual things, and other times they get the whole story. Sometimes they don't, and I think it does make it a little more difficult as you're trying to navigate, because no developer just uses one tool. They're going to use like 15, and they're all going to have to integrate, and they're all going to have to work together. But yeah, it's one of those really interesting spaces, and I think a lot of people end up getting it wrong, and try to cut corners, right?
Yeah, and something that you said, which really resonated, which was the developers use lots of products and lots of tools, and getting their work together. That's key, right? Like that. As we think about how we tell our stories, product teams are often incentivized for their product. Not necessarily to make it easier to use their product with other things. That's kind of a secondary goal, and it still matters, right? Absolutely. Like you want your product to be easy to use with other products, but a lot of the times at some companies, you end up having a situation where the product team is so focused on their product, they lose sight of how easy is it to use my product with other things. And that's right where the sweet spot for DevRel is. Like, yeah, we can link them up, and before products go out, we do a lot of what's called friction logging, which is we basically are developer zero, and we'll try out a new product, we'll try out new features, and a lot of that revolves around, can I use this with some other product? Are there rough edges, and can I feed that back to the product teams before outside folks get their hands on it? Right? Can we fix those kind of rough edges and smooth them out before it goes out, so that people just have this nice, hopefully smooth experience using it with other stuff. And that's again, like DevRel sweet spot, right? Like sitting between products and helping write those stories about how things work together. Other teams do it too, right? It's not just DevRel. Off the top, like solution architects on the sales side of things, we have a role at Google called the solution architect, and they're focused on these kind of end-to-end, like how do you tie different products together to create an architecture, a reference architecture for whatever the customer is trying to do. And again, the slight tweak is that the solution architect is doing it for an opportunity, for a sales opportunity. And it serves both purposes. It helps people use the stuff together more easily. But the goal really is landing that opportunity. Whereas DevRel, again, like, yes, we care about money because Google pays our paychecks, but like ultimately it's about the developer being able to create these things. That's what feeds us. That's our motivation.
Yep. No, totally. And I think that one of the nuances that is difficult probably for both of us, or I don't want to say it's difficult, maybe it's a unique challenge, is this the stuff that we're really talking to folks about is the infrastructure. It's the plumbing, right? It's the database side of stuff, which isn't as cool as a lot of other applications, APIs, frameworks, everything else. So, it's interesting. And I talk to folks about, new database products all the time, and they're like, we just want to capture developer, mind share. And it's like, Okay.
Well,
Yeah, like because honestly, a lot of a lot of developers don't really think database,
no,
right? It's not top of mind. It's like 17 layers down. Now it's going to vary from person to person, like but a front end developer, you're probably never going to like the feature sets that I look at. I'm like, I don't think anybody's going to care about those.
right?
Like, oh great, high availability, yay!
Woo!
Faster,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's
cool.
important, right? Yeah. It's important. It's absolutely important stuff. But like you said, not top of mind for a lot of developers. Yeah. It's hard. So I mean, it being an advocate for databases. And when I started at Google, I wasn't on databases. They put me on. I was on cloud IoT, which was super interesting, really easy to get wide reach because like everyone enjoys talking about the Internet of Things. Like that's just a fun
Yeah.
topic. So getting reach for everything and like finding communities to talk to, super easy. Then I shifted to databases and I was like, oh, well, this is different. And it's just tactics, like setting my own expectations of, right. We get asked, like, what do you measure success on? And what are the things that people like to say? Do you pay attention to the number of views or reads you get on your blogs or your YouTube videos? I'm like, I try not to, because if I focus too much on that, I'm looking at my video that might get, on a really good video, tens of thousands of views. It's kind of the metric, the range that we're talking. And then, a friend of mine that's working on MLAI gets, 1 million views on his next view. And it's like, oh, well, okay, that's a thing. But I have to keep coming back and thinking to myself, like, yes, I'm getting fewer views, but I am pretty sure that people that end up reading a blog post that I write or watch a video that I write genuinely care about the product or topic that I'm writing or talking about, because most people aren't going to go randomly find a database video and go watch it. Like that's not going to be a thing. The people that go do that are the people I'm trying to reach, those technical practitioners that are doing the work. Whereas MLAI, like it's a pretty broad conversational topic. IoT, broad conversational topic. People want to know, like, okay, what is my Google Home really doing? Yeah, of course they do. Developers and database folks, it's a smaller audience, but it is a deeply passionate audience. Like it's fun talking to someone that wants to explore the deep inner workings of the buffer cache and Postgres. It's like, yeah, let's get in there. And it's fun. Like that passion balances out the dopamine hit of getting, 1 million views on something like that. That passion is really cool to engage with and talk to people about. I love it. I love that.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think that's the thing, right? And I'm interested. You mentioned people ask you what you measure on, and they ask you if you measure views. You said no. You didn't tell us what you measure on.
Yeah, because no one knows. I say, I mean,
I came up with my own number, Matt's magic number, and no one knows what it is, but it's cool.
But it's okay, and it's going up and to the right, so we're all good. It's hard. How you measure developer advocacy is an industry wide problem, and it's it's one of my interview questions. When I interview someone, I'm probably going to ruin this. I can't ask this question anymore once I say this, but that's a question that I ask candidates coming in. It's like, well, if you've been doing advocacy for a while, how do you measure your own success? And if they don't start with, I don't really know, that's usually a red flag for me, because we have fuzzy metrics. We can tie ourselves to, a lot of the times we will try and tie ourselves to what we call the active developer metric. It's a rolling number of how many active developers you have on a product or something. And for a small company or a brand new product, as an advocate, I could probably move those numbers significantly enough that you could see a blip on a graph somewhere, right? Like I could throw an event, an on-hands workshop event, and after the event, if it's a small enough company, I totally will see an uptick of usage on whatever it is that I'm showing off. Yes. At a company like Google, though, like, how am I going to move the needle on a product that's been around? Like, I work a lot in Cloud SQL, our managed stuff, and it's been around for years. It's got a very robust and healthy user base. How am I going to tie a single piece of content that I put out there to an uptick in usage? Like, it's just, so that's kind of a failed metric. So what do you judge by? Well, how happy are my product teams about the work that I do for them? And am I getting asked to speak? those are kind of like my bar of, am I doing my job? Am I reaching communities enough that people are asking me to come out and do stuff? And that's my kind of external metric. An internal metric is, are my product teams happy? Am I engaged with the right people within the product teams? Am I talking to the engineering folks about stuff they can improve? Am I talking to product marketing about this note's not quite hitting it right with, I don't think this will hit the note right with developers? And are they happy with my contributions to their work? And it's a totally fuzzy metric, but that's, for myself, that's how I judge, is like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting because as I've talked with other folks in this space, a lot of them get pressured by management to get a number to
yeah,
show the growth, right? It doesn't matter what the number is. A lot of times it's just like, but I always advise people to start with what's the ultimate outcome, and
yeah,
obviously with Google, if you've got a million users, and you get 10,000 extra users, the graph doesn't even register it. Even though 10,000 users could be a good movement. But if you have a product that is just starting out, going from 1,000 users to 10,000 users, that's massive, right?
absolutely, right? Yeah, yeah,
And so it's easier to move early on and get that, those bumps. But it's interesting because there is such a hyper focus on this. I think people miss the forest through the trees because a lot of growing the community, a lot of growing your fans, if you will, or the people who are using your products. It's about the relationships
yeah,
that you build,
yeah,
and it's not just a one-on-one relationship. It's how you do it in mass,
yeah. It's the
how you
community
treat the
relationship.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
yeah,
community relationship. Absolutely. It's one to many for sure. Well, it's that, without relationships, none of our work will do anything, right? If you're not trusted if you don't have that solid relationship and trust with the community, when you're out there talking about your product stuff, they're going to just read you as a shill. You're going to be like, yeah, just another marketing voice out here. But if you have been embedded in the community, if you've been in the trenches with them, right? Like if you've really contributed, then you have that trust of like, okay, if Gabe is telling us something about these databases, like I know Gabe, like he's been part of our community for a while. Like I can trust that if he tells us this thing is cool, it's probably pretty cool. Like I should at least take a look at it. And likewise, from the other side, that applies to the internal teams too. If I don't have a good relationship with my product manager and I come to them and I say, this feature is just not going to land. Like we need to change up how this thing is done to make it land with the customers and developers. If I don't have that relationship, why on earth would they listen to me? I'm not in charge of the product. I've got no power. I've got no say. Like you're like, yeah, and I should listen to you. Why?
yeah,
So it's 100% forging those relationships is a requirement of the job.
yeah, definitely. So as we talk about forging the relationships with folks and talking about the infrastructure side of things, I am curious. You've been working in the database space now. You've been talking with the end users. You've been engaging with them, building those relationships. What are you seeing as some of those trends in this space right now that you're tracking as the lead for the DevRel for databases, but also maybe as a company, Google's tracking, like, hey, we're starting to see people wanting these types of things or exploring these types of databases.
Yeah, totally. So open source is actually a huge trend in the database world. The companies like Oracle have dominated the database space for so long, and what has happened is people are just sick of vendor lock-in. It is a constant problem, not just with database, with everything, but databases in particular. Vendor lock-in is particularly egregious. It's like our IP, our data is stored in your thing, and I can't leave your company. I'm completely subjected to your whim. And Google has made a lot of money on hosting open source, managing open source products. Cloud SQL, which is what I started in on my database journey, is hosted MySQL and Postgres and SQL Server now, but when I started, it wasn't. And it was open source databases that Google just decides, we will manage the database for you, which is great. And that trend carries through now to the industry. And we're seeing it particularly just in the last year or two. Postgres has just gone bananas, which is great to see. Postgres has been kind of steadily gaining on MySQL for a long time, as far as an open source database to, I guess, MariaDB, but gaining on it in terms of popularity. And it's going crazy now. and it's fun because that opens the door for what our new product that we just put out, AlloyDB, is at its core, it's Postgres. We've done stuff to it, and we've built on it, and we've added a bunch of stuff, but the compatibility between the two, what that means is that we get to participate in this trend in the industry, which is the open source adoption of saying like, yeah, you're using Postgres because it's a great open source interface. Fantastic. Bring it to the cloud. So you get to leverage all the power. So I should back up. Moving to the cloud is a trend that's been happening for the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years on the data side of things. We're not seeing net new projects done locally hardly at all anymore. It's just an understood thing that if you're going to have lots of data, you're going to put it in the cloud, because managing the infrastructure locally is such a pain. Why do that? Like it's a cost-effective measure now to just use the cloud. So trend one, moving to the cloud, that's been going for a while now. And then trend two is this adoption of open source as an open interface to all of the things that I want to do with my application. That is key, and I love it. I love the fact that open source is getting its day in the cloud way. It's open source has always had its day. It's popular, but seeing it in the cloud is a lot of fun, and I love it. And I my only regret is that I don't have more opportunity on my own time and energy to contribute directly. And like I would love to go back and contribute more to Postgres, but time is a thing. But yeah, so those are the trends that I'm seeing.
Well, it's interesting because and I'll slip back to the DevReli community side for just a second. When you say you'd love to contribute more, the fact of the matter is, just by having conversations like this, you are.
True.
True. And I think that one of the things I like to point out to everyone who's listening out there in video land, in YouTube land, everywhere else, is a lot of open source projects. Some of the best things you can do is provide feedback.
Yeah.
Like, share your experience, share your knowledge. And I think that is, really key. And, you didn't ask me, but I'll say, like, what is the thing I look at measuring in the DevRel space? I look at the number of people that I've enabled to become advocates of open source or of the products.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's not about, like, I can have one person, me, doing it, but that's boxed with whatever time and effort I can put in. But if I can, get 1,000 people, really excited and engaged, then that's awesome.
How do you scale it? Right.
Yeah. And so when you talk about like, that ecosystem, I think that it's really important for people in the open source ecosystem to realize that you don't need to be a C programmer to contribute.
Right.
And there is so much that you can do. And, when you talk about the cloud, people feel a little powerless sometimes in like their contributions in the cloud side, because they're like, oh, it's, as a service, it's behind some, weird, firewall-y thing that I can't get through. I don't see the code ever. And it's like, just because you're using Postgres, MySQL, Maria, whatever, on a cloud platform doesn't mean you can't contribute to that ecosystem.
That's right.
Right. A lot of it is, how do you show people how to do HA? How do you show people how to, build a better app, or take advantage of those components, those Lego blocks, and build them together into something that solves a really innovative solution? And those contributions, I think, are way more impactful long term than even the code can be.
That's fair. No, absolutely. And I should, of course, then caveat my statement, which was, I wish I could contribute code back to the community, because that's right. Like, that's my background. I'm an engineer. So you're 100% correct that, like, yes, of course, we contribute by getting out, talking about how to use this stuff, and just, I'm going to use a very markety term because it kind of fits, which is democratizing the open source product, which is make it accessible to as many people as possible. And Absolutely. that's a huge impact and huge contribution. I just miss coding a lot of the times. There are parts of me that I miss C. I love managing memory at a like micro level, and people look at me funny. It's like, but that's where I started. I love doing that.
Nostalgia.
Yeah,
nostalgia.
Exactly.
Yes, maybe we can insert some nostalgic music here.
That's right.
In this section.
Note to editors.
Yes, note to editors. But no. You mentioned Postgres' growth and how it's kind of gone bonkers the last few years. I'm curious. I have some theories on that, but I'd love to hear your theories on that. Why do you think it's become so popular?
That's a really good question, and I don't think I have a great answer for that. For a long time, the MySQL versus Postgres is kind of one of the great religious debates of the database world. It's like, okay, which do you use? Well, this is better at this, and that's better at that. I think, honestly, for me, Postgres, MySQL, at least for me, always has a small taste of that Oracle from the foundational piece of it. There is still a mental link between it and the man, and sort of the big 800-pound gorilla of the database world. I don't know how much that actually contributes to Postgres's popularity in terms of adoption and stuff, but at least for me, when I'm thinking about then of like, okay, what is the truly open source database? And in my mind, I think I lean a little bit more Postgres than I do MySQL for that reason. I don't know if it's not really grounded in reality, but that's a gut check. It's a total gut check.
Well, there are a lot of people who are just like, I don't want to use anything that's associated with Oracle.
Sure.
But I think from a MySQL perspective, it still has a massive install base. It's just not growing that much, right? And I think that there was a lot of adoption early on, and as new databases kind of got pushed out into the ecosystem, I think some of the growth was kind of sucked away, but still a very awesome, popular database. But from a Postgres perspective, the things that I kind of see is we've entered a new phase in the open source space where a lot of the new projects that we're developing are built on the shoulders of giants in that they take code or they take frameworks or APIs from other open source projects and combine them and build something even better, right? And I mean, we've done that for a while. I mean, if you think about like Elastic was started with Lucene, right? So
right.
You get kind of like this, like you start with something, you make it better, you play around with the code. Postgres is the only database that is really truly open and run by kind of a community and doesn't have a single corporate kind of backer, which means that you have an insanely liberal license and you have a lot of ability to influence the project. But I think it also means that as companies are developing their new applications, their new programs, their new databases, when you look at like Cockroach or Yugabyte or other databases, they're like, Postgres is the natural place because I can use a infrastructure, a framework that already exists, and is popular, and I can use it and make it compatible, make it work together, and that's awesome, right? And so we can work together. And the Postgres community is very open about that. I was just talking with Bruce Momjam not too long ago, and he was like, "We welcome this because the more people who are using Postgres libraries, using Postgres APIs, the better it makes the ecosystem." So I think it's that kind of like synergistic, another marketing word, a symbiotic relationship. Two marketing words. Yeah, we're getting a little markety here.
But welcoming. It's welcoming, right? Like at the end of the day, it's really like it's about welcoming people into collaborating. It's that openness. And you're right. I think, and I don't know if I was kind of like I'm subconsciously kind of picking up on that because of like, the corporate backing for MySQL, or if but you're right. You're absolutely right. The community it's just nice. It's just nice. Like at the end of the day, you work with nice people, and and I think that's, I don't want to distill Postgres down. It's like, I use it because it's nice, but it kind of is. It's very nice.
That's okay. I like everybody in the ecosystem, right? But this leads to innovation and, not only the adoption of Postgres, but it also leads to, new and expansive use cases. And this is where, from a Google perspective, you all just announced AlloyDB, which is part of that Postgres ecosystem.
Absolutely.
So maybe for those who may have not seen the announcement, can you give us the 10,000 foot? What the heck is Alloy?
Yeah, so AlloyDB is a Postgres compatible database engine. That's the key. scales up. It scales up hugely and can handle the sort of workloads that you would normally have to put onto a big commercial database. That's the goal, is to create a commercial grade database that is using Postgres as its interface. That's it. All of the rest is just implementation details. But that was the core motivation behind it, was, because we have Cloud SQL. Cloud SQL is Postgres on Cloud SQL is an amazing product. It's great. It takes away all of the boilerplate management that you need to do. But if you want to get scale out of Cloud SQL, you have to do it on your own. You have to set up the replication. You have to set up the load balancing. You have to do all of those pieces. And for Postgres, one of the biggest pain points for Postgres is when you get up at scale with Postgres, vacuuming becomes a huge problem. And if folks don't know, vacuuming is kind of the garbage cleanup for Postgres. Is when you delete rows, they don't really go away. It waits until you vacuum to get rid of that stuff. And if you've got a high enough churn on your database, enough workload on there, vacuuming becomes a real problem. Like, you can really hammer your database if you do it wrong. AlloyDB automates a lot of that. It handles with Google has kind of woven in machine learning into the core of AlloyDB, where it will figure out when the best time to do your vacuuming is and what the best way of doing it. And there's, it does the same thing for the memory management. So your partitioning and all of the, that kind of stuff. It handles the next level of boilerplate kind of infrastructure stuff that you would have to do if you're scaling your database. So it's sort of started from this place of the Postgres database itself, and it's starting to take away the pain points of using it at scale. That's the goal of AlloyDB.
Well, and Postgres is great out of the box. It is a great general purpose database. It's very extensible.
Yep.
And we've seen that other companies have picked up on this as well, where it's like, from a scale perspective, Postgres scales really well, single machine up to a certain size. It handles workloads. It can be tweaked and tuned and augmented, but once you start to get at a certain size, a certain scale, then you start to look at alternative measures, whether that is systems that do sharding, whether that's systems that do other clustering software, read write splitting, all kinds of fun, exciting topics that you do in relational database land.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are looking at, hey, from a developer perspective, they don't really care about that. They just want it to work.
Yeah.
Right. They want it fast, available, and secure.
That's hard. It's hard to do that, right? And at scale, that's a hard accomplishment. That's really, it's not an easy thing to do. And I was super skeptical about AlloyDB when I first heard about it internally, and we were first talking about it. I went, "You're doing what now? Really? Okay." And that came from my sentimentality around Cloud SQL, and like, look, we can throw Cloud SQL at a monstrously large machine. In the cloud, like, we have these machines that are terabytes of memory and just like absurd numbers of CPUs. And I'm kind of thinking like, okay, what kind of a workload needs to scale past that? Like, is there really a need in the market to scale past this monstrously vertical scaled machine that we can throw out? And the answer is 100% yes. Because there's some things that it doesn't matter how big your machine is, you're still going to cripple the database. Because it doesn't matter how big your CPUs and your memory are, you're still going to have a problem with table locks and read locking and stuff. There is always a case to need to scale out rather than just scale up. It's always a thing. So yes, the answer to that, and they won me over. The product team actually won me over internally, and now I'm happy I'm working on it.
So I just have like this picture in my mind of you like coming into the conference room, sitting down your coffee, crossing your arms and go, "Convince me that I should use this."
I kind of did that. Not quite. I don't drink coffee, so it wasn't coffee, but yeah, okay. I mean, it was talking to the product team and being like, "Look, I'm your developer audience. If you can't convince me that this is going to land, how on earth am I going to help talk to developers about, practitioners about this? I need to understand what deeply this thing is solving for those folks." And they did. And, we had long conversations about that. And it's more complicated even than that, because then we got into like, okay, now how do we actually tell developers which one to use. Should they use Cloud SQL? Should they use AlloyDB? And we've got, there's Spanner, which is our cat break-in database, the unicorn. Was like, okay, well, there's Spanner too, and it scales super huge, and it's relational. Like, shouldn't we just tell people to use Spanner? And so there was a lot of internal discussion that we had of like, look, there are the product teams knew, like they knew why one versus the other, but communicating that in a way that actually made sense to people using these databases was a much harder problem. That was really, it was a big challenge for us. And we've got these huge internal documents that have a bajillion revisions now about talking about it ad nauseum, which is great because what that does is it forces them to really think about this stuff with the implementations. Like, okay, what problems does this really solve? Like, we know we think it solves, right? We think it solves the large scale workload problem for Postgres users, but does it really? And those conversations were absolutely what crystallized that for all of us internally. And it's ultimately what convinced me as part of the team. And so now I can go out and talk about it and not feel like I'm a shill.
So do you have like, you mentioned that kind of like it took lots of documentation, really long, docs to kind of figure out like where each of these products fit. Is there a visualization somewhere that someone could go and like be like, okay, I'm going to use this for this type of application, this for that type of application, this for that type of application? Just like an easy to use type of thing yet?
Not yet. Honestly, that's what we're actively working on now. Is now
good.
Creating.
Please, Gabe, give us.
Yeah. I know. We have it in words, right? Like, okay. It is in words. It's in the documentation that describes it. So it is there, but there is not yet the easy to use visualizations are really hard. Like, getting good ones. A teammate of mine, Priyanka, has done a series of, they're kind of like almost in the comic book style, but they're kind of pretty in-depth topics around cloud and stuff. And one of the ones that she did was, where do I store my stuff is kind of the topic of the comic. And it's fantastic.
Good.
And it has all of our database products on there and it does a pretty good job of that. We just haven't updated it yet for AlloyDB. It's funny that a tweet, was it yesterday? It might've been yesterday or the day before, literally just came out about it. And I tweeted back, hey, like, we should totally update this for AlloyDB. And she said, yeah, we totally should. So it's top of mind for us to have this easy to digest graphic. And we have it for most of our databases. It just hasn't woven AlloyDB into it yet. That's on our plate to do.
So the most important question that comes out of what you just said is, did they make you into a superhero in the comic?
Sadly, no. I don't appear anywhere in the comics. The heroes are the products. Ultimately, we're all sidekicks. Advocates are total sidekicks. The heroes.
but you still okay, but they can still put you in the comic as a sidekick.
I know. I should talk to Priyanka about that. Priyanka, we should make a comic with. Actually, that would be kind of fun. That would be fun.
Yeah,
like proper superhero style comics about the Advocate.
You can make me the villain. I'll be the villain.
I'll
be like anti-performance man. I'm going to destroy your performance.
All right. Not only that, we're gonna get. I want to do the old serial style radio shows. If we do that, I'm going to call you in as our villain.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
I can do voices. I'll do voices. I'll
nice.
figure something out.
All right. Yeah. All my people call your people.
Super awesome. So Gabe, on AlloyDB, one of the things that I saw I think yesterday, actually, yesterday was, some of the infrastructure came out that it's actually a column database.
Yeah.
At its core, which is
ish, right? So it's still Postgres. It's still Postgres, 100%. It's still Postgres. But like you said, the blog post that came out was going into a lot of the details of what we call the Columnar Engine. The Columnar Engine is a lot of things. The kind of the core piece that I like to talk about is that it layers an extra memory cache is what it does. So as you're doing your stuff in Postgres, it is taking the standard buffer cache that it's got, and it's rearranging it on writes to then arrange the data into a columnar format. And that's, for folks that don't spend their day-to-day pondering what that actually means, what it does is it allows you to take the data that's coming through and rearrange it in a way that is optimal to re-retrieve aggregate information. So in kind of common parlance, it makes reads easier. It makes it faster in memory because it leverages the way that memory works is optimized for arrays. Array values
Mm-hmm.
is what CPU and memory is optimized to iterate over is arrays. Well, when you've got a standard buffer cache for Postgres, it is basically taking a snapshot of your disk data, the row-based data, and moving it into memory, which is absolutely faster. Your memory can access it quicker, but it's not optimized for the memory. By rearranging the data into columns or arrays, if you will, that now further optimizes for the way that memory functions at its core. And you can get a lot of extra performance out of just that. Now, the engine, I don't want to go. There's the blog post. If you want to go in deep, you can read the blog post about kind of what the full spam
it is. We'll make sure to
but
put it in the link as well here.
Yeah. But that's the key of having this columnar store in memory in addition to your buffer cache. Really, we don't actually call it this in any of our marketing materials, but it basically turns Postgres into an HTAB, which is that hybrid transactional application it makes it so much more performant for that analytic or read style traffic. That's a lot of the core gains that we get out of this. It's fun. And that honestly, this was one of the things that kind of convinced me that we have some legit technology behind AlloyDB. There's more, but like this was my turning point in my journey of being won over by AlloyDB was, we really kind of fundamentally changed the way the data access happens for Postgres without affecting the basic compatibility and interface to Postgres. That's really cool. Like that is a genuinely awesome thing that we were able to do that. Like that. So yeah, now it's just like, okay, people that know that, it's fun watching the community start to pick up on it. On the day and the couple of days after we launched, we had all kinds of people like BI folks coming out of the woodwork, like, I can use this for BI, and running benchmarks against like full on analytic database, data warehouses. I'm like, well, there's still okay, that's not quite what we were intending, but it's interesting that you went there, because I want to, for your listeners, I want to emphasize that it is not going to have the same kind of performance as a proper OLAP, warehouse. It's not designed as that, but what it does, the goal is it just opens up use cases where you might have to try to create some kind of hybrid. Well, all right, I've got my operational transactional over here, and anytime I want to do heavy reads, I've got to create a pipeline over to like a BigQuery or Snowflake or something like that. Like, let's capture those folks where you don't have to expand your tech stack into all these multiple places. Let's just make it better. We'll see. We'll see if we hit that mark.
Fair enough. So, Gabe, I've started this the last few months with my guests. I like to end with the rapid fire round of just random questions that come out of nowhere. So I have no idea what question's going to pop into my head next.
I'm ready.
So are you ready for it? Okay.
It's like stream of consciousness, like any.
It's a total stream of consciousness. Yes.
I love it.
So if you had to become a villain in a movie or comic book or book, which villain would you become?
Magneto.
Why?
And I don't even know why. It's just it's honestly the first thing that popped in my head.
Wow. Okay. Fair enough.
That's
okay. That's okay. That's fine. That's fine. So cool. So if we're to meet up at a conference and we're to go out to dinner, what are you going to order?
Sushi.
Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Fan. Yes. And so, you mentioned that you don't drink coffee, but is there a drink of choice to drink with the sushi or after the sushi or in lieu of like breakfast or something?
Sadly, water is my first choice, but if I am getting sushi, sake will be involved.
Okay. Sake will be involved. There you go. And so what is the last book that you read?
I reread The Martian recently. Andy Weir's book, The Martian. Yeah. It is a favorite. I read it a lot. It's a good one.
Yeah, he has a lot of great books. Love all of them. So I think I just read Artemis. Was it Artemis?
Yeah, the one that came out right after Martian.
Yeah. So
have you read Project Hail Mary?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Okay, good,
Yes.
good,
Yes.
good.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a great one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. And so, what is your favorite TV show or movie of all time? And you can say one that you actually were in if you want, even if we've never heard of it.
No, nothing I was in. The Princess Bride is probably my favorite movie.
Oh, yes.
And book, like those that they're both amazing in their own right. So I think for movie, Princess Bride. TV show, boy, I don't know. I don't know that I have a favorite TV show. That's like asking an author what their favorite book is. Like I have a hard time with that.
That's okay. That's okay.
Movie Princess Bride. Princess Bride.
Princess Bride is the pinnacle of awesomeness. So it is okay. I will end it there. I
Sweet.
mean, actually, my favorite line from that is when Wesley is telling Buttercup, about his time on the, with the Dread Pirate Roberts, good job, Wesley, well done, sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning.
Yeah,
I love that line. I don't know why. It just sticks with me all the time. So yeah. Anyway, so great movie. Gabe, thank you for coming out, hanging out with us. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge on the DevRel space around what Google's doing with AlloyDB and in the database space in general. It's always awesome to chat.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I love doing this stuff. This is one of my favorite parts of this job, is getting to do stuff like this.
Awesome. And for those who are watching, go ahead, like, subscribe, leave a comment, say, that Gabe is wrong. He shouldn't be Magneto. He should be someone else. Feel free to put in your favorite movie or your favorite quote from The Princess Bride. We would love to hear from it. Wow, what a great episode that was. We really appreciate you coming and checking it out. We hope that you love open source as much as we do. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, tune in to next week's episode. We really appreciate you coming and talking open source with us.